The restaurant owner jokingly invited the dishwasher to negotiate, but as soon as she read the contract, the suppliers froze. The restaurant owner never had a free moment, so there was no time for a meal. Such sad thoughts had overtaken Mr. Harris at the end of the workday. He cast a melancholy glance at the full-length mirror on the wall, tired eyes, downturned corners of the mouth, a worried wrinkle between the brows. Yes, perhaps it was time to visit the cosmetologist. The owner of a successful restaurant couldn't afford to look bad. A vacation would be nice, even just for a day or two to get proper rest and finally see his wife. He left for work so early that she didn't have time to wake up, and when he returned, he found her still asleep. Not good. Not good at all. She might even find herself a lover. Women don't like being left alone for too long. Finally tearing his gaze away from his despondent reflection, Mr. Harris sat down at the table. There lay a resignation letter written in calligraphy from the manager. Just today, he had finished his last day. The phone vibrated again. It was, of course, Jessica, wondering if she should expect him for dinner and ready to start a scene when she found out he wouldn't be there. Well, he got married, he should endure. Yes, darling, he tried to inject as much honey into his voice as possible. I was just thinking about you. About me? It's nice to know you haven't forgotten you have a wife. Mr. Harris closed his eyes. He could almost see his wife pouting in offense. Exactly, a scandal was imminent. MH, you know how much I have on my plate right now. Chris quit, I'm swamped. Tomorrow I have to finalize a contract, and I haven't even read it properly. Of course, you're a busy man. Can't blame you for not thinking about your wife. I can't split myself in two. You understand? I can't. He forcefully pressed the hang-up button. Jessica had her own interests in life. She couldn't understand that all her branded stuff, beauty salons, and trips, everything she loves so much, cost a lot of money that he earns. But Jessica is married, and she's used to taking money from the nightstand or the bank card. Where they come from is not her concern. He tucked away the resignation letter from the former manager into the desk. Alas, it was too early to think about vacation, Jerry, too early. Victoria, there's still a spot here, the bartender informed, presenting the dishwasher with a perfectly clean glass. He did it very theatrically, just like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat in front of a bewildered audience, an old and generous cheap trick. But the spectators still gasped out of habit, although Justin had neither a hat nor an audience, just a couple of waitresses lazily sitting at the counter. They wanted to see how the bartender skillfully humiliated this arrogant chick, though he hadn't succeeded so far. The glass gleamed with cleanliness. In its convex glass, little stars sparkled from the light of a Christmas garland. Justin raised an eyebrow. The dishwasher responded with an indifferent gaze. "And where do you see dirt?" she asked. The waitresses immediately started whispering animatedly among themselves. It looked quite disgusting, those sidelong glances towards Victoria, giggling. She didn't even bother to look at them. Too much honor. "So, where's the dirt?" the dishwasher repeated without touching it. Justin pointed to a tiny speck of dust settled on the rim of the glass. "You did wipe it off," he said, handing the glass to Victoria. "You need to be more attentive if you want to stay here." The excitement of the waitresses reached its peak. It was expressed in the fact that they all fell silent at once, staring at Victoria. The bartender always found something to pick on her about. Is she really going to put up with this? But the stubborn girl just shrugged and grabbed the towel from the rack. "Sorry," she said, carefully wiping away the speck of dust. Justin opened his mouth to say something else, but Victoria had already disappeared into the kitchen, and at the bar, a bewildered silence settled in. "She must have nerves of steel," finally muttered one of the girls. "Completely unflappable." "Exactly," the other agreed. Unfazed, Justin silently picked up a glass and put it back in its place. Mr. Harris, who had been observing the whole scene from the shadow by the entrance to the hall, smirked crookedly and approached the bar. "You're not trying hard enough, Justin," he said. "Can't even properly get rid of a dishwasher. Clearly, you're not management material. Consider it a loss." Well, I didn't exactly sign up to argue with you. Doesn't matter. Consider it a loss. We'll call it a penalty for failing the task. The bartender silently pulled out a $10 bill from his pocket and handed it to the boss. You can't rely on anyone, sighed Mr. Harris. What did I ask you for? Get rid of that log and ask for whatever you want. I want her gone from here. Understood. Well, she's actually doing fine with her work, Justin shrugged. She doesn't disrespect anyone, hasn't tried to steal anything. There's nothing to accuse her of. But if you don't like her, then. Yes. Mr. Harris slammed his palm on the bar so hard that the glasses on the tray jumped and clinked plaintively. I don't like her, and I want her gone from here. They sent me this idiot from some employment center, but I don't like her. And if you don't provoke her into a scene, then you won't be liked either. Do you understand me? The waitresses fell silent in fear. The bartender calmly took the glasses and began to arrange them in their places. I understand, Mr. Harris, he said calmly. That you're very irritated right now. The manager left, and you haven't found a replacement yet. But tell me, would it be better if you lost a good dishwasher and a bartender? And are you my psychologist? Roared the boss, now completely enraged. Veins bulged on his neck from anger, and his face flushed so red that it seemed any moment he would explode. I studied psychology once, Justin replied, neatly folding the towel. I even got a diploma. But I make more money as a bartender. Then get to work in your field, you idiot. Do you understand me? Get your things and get the hell out of here, you piece of trash, and don't let me see your disgusting face here again. Don't continue. I understand perfectly. Do you need a statement from me? Write it. Mr. Harris barked. Let's go to the office, I'll give you paper and pen. Justin, maintaining an Olympian calm, followed his boss. The waitresses exchanged uncertain glances. How do we not end up in trouble, murmured one of them. They knew well that if they fell under the boss's wrath, there would be no avoiding dismissal. Victoria opened the kitchen window and took a deep breath of the refreshing cold air. She didn't want to think about what was happening out there in the hall. Probably, the girls and the bartender were laughing again or gossiping. She knew that all sorts of rumors circulated about her in the restaurant, sometimes fantastical ones. Some said she was a vagrant picked up by the owner from the street, cleaned up, and given a job out of pity. Others claimed she was some distant relative of his acquaintances, a wayward girl, either an alcoholic or worse. Supposedly, the boss didn't let her sink completely to the bottom. Victoria herself remained silent on the matter. She was generally not talkative. This annoyed many. Was it out of arrogance that she didn't want to talk to anyone? But it was hard to find fault with her. She arrived earlier than anyone else, worked neatly and quickly, and never attempted to steal anything from the kitchen. And there were plenty of opportunities for that, sometimes even the chefs couldn't resist the temptation. Victoria caught them a couple of times engaged in this unworthy activity, but as usual, she kept silent. Such a mysterious personality, straw-colored hair, brown tan, and the seal of silence on withered lips. She was neither loved nor trusted. Who knows what surprises one could expect from a person who only spoke when necessary and seemed incapable of smiling. She took a few deep breaths and closed the window. The restaurant was closed, it was time to head home. Victoria removed her apron and scarf, changing into a worn-out jacket. In the dining hall, the waitresses were still chatting about something, and there was the sound of clinking. Justin was tidying up his bar. It was good that she wouldn't have to pass by him. There was a service exit for the staff. Victoria, wait. She stopped, barely having stepped a couple of meters away from the restaurant. The bartender ran out after her, his jacket unbuttoned and his cap sticking out of his pocket. Wait, Victoria. He approached, out of breath and oddly flustered. Hi, I wanted to apologize to you, and here, this is for you. He hastily handed her a paper bag. Victoria sniffed it. A delightful aroma wafted from the bag, vanilla with a hint of cinnamon. There was also an enticing blend of rum and cocoa beans, real ones, not those plasticine milk chocolates you find in any store. "It's a chocolate cake," Justin explained. "It wasn't really ordered much today, so the pastry chefs decided to give it to me. Have it with some tea, it's delicious." She smiled faintly. "Maybe you'll keep me company, then? I live nearby." He tensed slightly, just a little, upon hearing her offer. This was Victoria, the silent, indifferent dishwasher, suddenly saying something like this. Her face revealed nothing, and for some reason, that was comforting. Sometimes, an invitation for tea is just that, an invitation for tea. Victoria smirked as if she had overheard his thoughts. "So, are you coming?" "I am," the bartender decided. At least she definitely wasn't interested in him romantically, and if that was the case, why not agree? Victoria lived in an old, perhaps too old, house. Justin felt uneasy as he glanced at the neglected balconies, windows with weathered wooden frames that no one bothered to paint. There wasn't even an intercom. "Yeah, looks like people who don't care about anything live here," he blurted out, instantly regretting his words. "Sorry, I didn't mean to imply, that's not what I meant." Victoria seemed not to notice his awkwardness. "It's mostly pensioners who live here," she said. "People who weren't lucky, I mean, those without children or those whose children abandoned them. Those swindled by scammers, left penniless, and fire victims. This is social housing, basically, for those who have nowhere else to go." "Yeah." Justin followed her into the dark hallway. At least there was that. And in the next moment, he received a strong jab in the ribs and then a push against his shoulder. Victoria pressed him against the wall, her elbow against his throat, not too hard yet, but it would be better not to move. "What are you doing?" he whispered. He felt her breath close, it smelled of clothes and coffee. "So, I don't wash the glasses well," Victoria softly sang, "so I might not stick around in your crappy dive." "Stop it." I apologized. Now he was genuinely scared. "I apologized, Victoria." "Yes." She moved her elbow away from his throat. "You apologized. Now consider it accepted." "Oh." Justin slid down the wall, rubbing his throat. He still distinctly felt the imprint of Victoria's elbow. It was hot and pulsating. "Are you crazy? You scared me like a puppy." His eyes were getting used to the darkness, and now he could see Victoria shrugging nonchalantly. Her gesture could mean anything from regret to agreement. "I wanted to scare you," she said calmly, "so you wouldn't dare behave like that again. You apologized to me, but what if tomorrow another quiet girl takes my place? So that you never even think about bullying someone again." "You're ruthless," he sighed. But there was no anger in his voice, rather admiration. Victoria sensed that. "Come on," she said, reaching out her hand. "We still haven't tried this cake. Get up." And he followed her again, though he didn't quite know why. The room was small, but Justin strangely liked it, yellow curtains on the windows, and instead of a curtain rod, a sanded wooden branch. A homemade lampshade made of glass beads adorned the chandelier, and an identical one sat on the table lamp. The couch and the only armchair were covered with bright, albeit cheap, blankets. He knew they were cheap for sure, he had recently bought the same ones at a discount store. "It's cozy here," he said sincerely. "Really? Everything feels so warm." Victoria smiled, but this time it seemed genuine, and Justin suddenly thought he might be the first one to see this smile. "I don't have a table, though," she said. "But we can eat on the windowsill if you don't mind." "Mind? Me?" he exclaimed. "Who do you take me for? I've eaten sitting on the floor before." "Well, then why don't you boil the kettle?" Victoria suggested. "Over there in the kitchen. And I'll change in the meantime." She slipped into the bathroom, grabbing some casual clothes from the couch. Justin walked into the kitchen. It wasn't as cozy here, an old electric kettle, a gas stove, and in the corner, a small shelf with dishes. But still, he didn't want Victoria to what about Victoria? He decided not to clutter his mind with empty thoughts. He boiled the water, found tea bags on the shelf, sliced the cake, and arranged the pieces on plates. He moved all this splendor to the windowsill, sat on a stool, and waited for the hostess. On the fridge, also far from new, there was a pot with some plant. Justin never knew how to distinguish them. And on the door, as usual, there were several magnets and photos. Among them, a photo of a girl about 4 or 5 years old with wavy dark hair and deep gray-blue eyes. The girl stood on a white parapet with the sunlit sea stretching behind her. Next to her was a man, young and handsome, laughing happily as he looked at the little girl. "I wonder who they are." "Justin, I'm here," Victoria called. He shouted back, "Dinner served." Victoria entered the kitchen, and Justin, seeing her, was stunned. He was used to seeing her in shapeless work clothes and a black apron, and never thought that beneath that meaningless attire there could be, but now, before him stood a slender young woman in a home dress. Suddenly, it became noticeable how graceful her long neck and slender waist were. And most importantly, her straw-like, awful hair, which always stuck out from under the scarf and fell into her eyes, turned out to be fake, a silly wig under which was a short boyish haircut. The dark hair curled exactly like the girl in the photo. "Surprised?" she asked with a smile. Justin swallowed nervously. "I guess I don't know much about you," he finally said. She laughed sincerely, joyfully, and so contagiously that Justin caught her laughter and laughed too, not quite understanding what amused him so much. "Well, okay," she waved her hand. "Let's have some tea, then." He eagerly pulled out another stool for her. "Please, madam." Victoria thanked him with a slight nod and sat down. "Listen, about that girl in the photo," he nodded towards the fridge. "Who's that?" Victoria poked at the cake thoughtfully with her spoon. "That's my daughter." "And her father." "So, you're married?" "Not anymore," she sighed silently. "Sorry." "Everything's okay," she said. "Right? I mean, I wasn't really married either, for real. So let's just say. And where's your daughter?" He immediately scolded himself for another tactless question, but now he just couldn't stop asking them. This woman turned out to be too unusual, and the mysteries surrounding her demanded some explanation, even if it was trivial. "She's at daycare," Victoria replied, lying calmly. "I leave her there on the days I work. There used to be 5-day weeks." Justin laughed. "How could I not know? I grew up that way until school. My mom raised me alone." "Well, but I think they canceled 5-day weeks, didn't they? And now there are just these rotating groups. You can't always pick up the child. Someone works at night, for example. Are you enjoying the food, by the way?" He looked at his plate. Indeed, he hadn't even touched the cake, but Victoria was devouring her piece eagerly. Suddenly, Justin noticed her hands' slim palms, long fingers. Nails, though without polish, were neat, trimmed short, and filed at the edges. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "What?" She stared at him in surprise, still not bringing the spoon to her mouth. "What are you talking about? You're not who you pretend to be." "Oh, really?" Sparks of laughter danced in her blue-green eyes. "And who do you think I am? A princess in exile?" "You're laughing for no reason," Justin muttered. "Remember, I used to work in a bar. So, well, when you work in a place like that, you quickly learn to understand people. I can tell that a person who eats in restaurants all the time and who's here for the first time, to impress a girl or something." "Interesting. Like you," he boldly looked her in the face. "You're used to the good life. I see how you sit, your back is straight like a dancer's. And you don't put your elbows on the table, although this isn't even a table. And also, this photo, the sea, a white parapet, some expensive place, probably. And the man, I'm not stupid. I see what kind of watch he's wearing. What if it's fake?" Victoria winked. "Doesn't matter. And how your apartment is decorated, you see, ordinary people don't have such a penchant for bright colors." He paused. Victoria remained silent. "But still, you invited me to your place, allowed me to see how you live, and you without that ugly wig, it's clear you're hiding something about yourself." But I won't ask what exactly. I'm just curious, why did you decide that I'm someone you can trust? Part 4 ***. He didn't know how long the silence had lasted. Victoria picked up crumbs of cake from her plate with her finger and ate them with such a focused look as if there were no more serious activities in the world. But eventually, there were no more crumbs, and she had to look up. Maybe everyone needs a friend, that's all, she said. You? You're the only one who treated me like a human. Not right away, though, Justin remarked. She shrugged again. Well, better late than never. Besides, I'm not stupid. I understand who's behind all this. Mr. Harris can't stand me. Oh, he admires you. You know about that too? People gossip, Victoria casually replied. And I listen. You can learn a lot just by watching and listening. Justin was stunned into silence. He fired you, didn't he? She asked. That question was like a point-blank shot. He did, Justin reluctantly replied. But whatever. I never liked working for that tyrant anyway. I'd rather chat for a week unemployed than put up with his antics. Don't you think so? I do, she smiled again. That's why I wanted to have tea with you. You're the only one with character. But it doesn't matter. I didn't know you had such a sharp eye. And now it's probably too late to pretend, isn't it? Victoria looked at the photo on the refrigerator door. I'm still not asking you anything, he reminded gently. If you don't want to, you don't have to say anything. This was taken in Morocco, she sighed. Michael and I loved vacationing there. Yes, she intercepted Justin's surprised look. That was his name. And we loved going to Morocco. You know how beautiful it is there, the tall sky and colorful mosaic on every corner. Markets with mountains of spices that make your head spin and your mouth water. And real Eastern coffee brewed on sand in those little clay pots with long handles. And traders with bundles of beads, glass ones, cheap beads. But the sun plays on their facets in such a way that it seems like there's an Eastern fairy tale hidden in each bead. Yes, that's Morocco. This photo, she pointed to the picture, is the very last one. A week later, my daughter's father was gone, and I was left alone, penniless, homeless, with a little child in my arms. Did he leave you nothing? What about his daughter? She's entitled to inherit, isn't she? I guess I started from the wrong end, Victoria smirked. Well, let me try again. Actually, I come from a wealthy family, upper class. Diplomat parents, high society, the whole deal. Since childhood, there were trips to Europe, language courses, dance lessons, etiquette training. That's where I got my ability to stand tall and not put elbows on the table. But you see, my parents really wanted me to follow in their footsteps. And you wanted something else, Justin guessed. Dancing, she confessed. I always wanted to dance, and probably nothing else attracted me as much. For dancers, it's a special feeling, like, flying over the ocean. And of course, when I told my parents I didn't want to be a diplomat either, they were very disappointed. And then, in the heat of the moment, they pointed me, the ungrateful one, to the door. Maybe it wasn't entirely serious, but I was even glad. A taste of freedom was just what I needed. I'd wanted it for a long time. And so, I grabbed my things and left them. Straight to the dance school, got a bed in the dorm, and in the evenings, I worked as a dishwasher, just like now. Of course, my mom and dad forgave me and found me after a month. They begged me to come back, to come to my senses, to realize that they only wished me well and all that. But by then, I had already tasted freedom. And during that month, I had a lot of time to think. I realized that the life they wanted for me would have suffocated me sooner or later. I would probably have lived comfortably, steadily, but utterly meaninglessly. I wouldn't understand why all this, and I would never have known who I am. But I couldn't just leave, change everything either, because with years it gets harder to give up abundance. Do you understand what I mean? I understand, Justin chuckled. There was nothing more to add. Didn't he graduate from the psychology department just to make his mom feel more at ease? And he himself became a bartender because he was always drawn to the festive atmosphere. "All right," nodded Victoria. "So I didn't go back. I had my favorite pastime, a place to stay, and I realized I could earn my own bread. I didn't return, and I've never regretted it. And soon, at some party, I met a guy. By the way, he also lived in our dorm, just one floor above. Well, we hadn't met earlier. Like me, he was passionate about dance. And of course, things between us escalated quickly. We were lucky in general. We both quickly passed the audition for the theater and became almost stars, tours, money, and our first trip to Morocco. With the theater, of course, there's an annual festival there. But never mind. Michael and I were just ecstatic then. How we both fell in love with this country, its streets, markets, and this amazing cuisine, it was like a miracle. But then everything went wrong. Part 5 ***. And I still don't know what happened there, Victoria continued, her voice quieter now. Maybe they decided to save on building materials. But when they announced our troupe, and we were the first to go, opening the festival, the stage steps collapsed. They were made of rotten planks. Then there was talk about it being sabotage, like there were disputes about who would open the festival. Of course, the Moroccans insisted on their guys, it made sense, and their dance teams were very good. But it's not just about that. Money plays a big role in show business, and among the festival sponsors were some serious companies from our country. They insisted that our performance should open the festival. We were supposed to not go behind the scenes but walk past the audience and go up on stage. Michael got the worst of it, he had several fractures, and some piece of wood got lodged in his leg. The doctor said he would walk, of course, but he would never dance again. We went back home and decided not to give in to despair. We started, so to speak, to look for the positives, and we found them. Firstly, we could finally think about having children. Obviously, you don't dance with a pregnant belly, but I didn't want to stay in the theater without Michael and followed him out. And then, we were crazy about Moroccan cuisine, so we decided to try opening a cafe to start with. We had enough money for it. We didn't think much about comfort in those days and just lived in that little room in the dorm, saving all our earnings. In short, we tried it, and it all worked out. Honestly, I was even surprised myself at how such success came almost effortlessly. But what happened, happened. Within 2 years, we had our own restaurant, and I got pregnant. Michael wanted us to get married, but I kept asking him to wait with the new job, pregnancy, then a little child. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment. And meanwhile, we kept busy. We went to Morocco for new recipes, you can always diversify the menu. And then one day, it happened. What? Asked Justin, completely spellbound by her story. Victoria took a sip of her tea. Nothing much, just our own stupidity, really. We were offered a contract to supply Moroccan spices. Some guys, actually from our own circle, who had a couple of their own plantations, made the offer. They also suggested hiring an excellent chef who didn't mind moving to another country. We agreed, and then the shipment was stopped at customs. The spice sacks contained hidden illegal substances. The plan was for the customs officers not to notice anything, and then they would sell it through the chef. When we tried to find those enterprising guys, it turned out they were working with fake documents, and now there's no way to prove anything. Michael, as the client, ended up under investigation but didn't live to see the trial. I was told it was a heart attack. The restaurant was closed, and I, fearing that chef, quickly packed everything I needed into one bag, grabbed my child, and left for the first city I could find. Well, here. Initially, I went to social services, but they turned me away. I reached out to a women's support center for those going through difficult life situations. That's where they helped me. They arranged this accommodation and a kindergarten for my daughter, then helped me find a job in a restaurant. Do you still fear him? Justin asked. That chef and his cronies? Is that why you're working as a dishwasher, though you could? And why do you wear that wig? Trying to blend in? Victoria smiled sadly. Maybe, yeah. It's better not to attract unnecessary attention, right? I have a little child. I have to live. She said it so matter-of-factly, as if injustice didn't anger her, taking away a thriving business, as if the pain of losing a loved one didn't haunt her. You have to live. Simply have to, that's all. Justin felt like shouting, but he gently covered her narrow hand with his. You can always count on me, he said. Victoria smiled at him and nodded. Thank you. The next morning, Mr. Harris arrived at work in the darkest mood he could muster. The previous evening, he had lost an excellent bartender as well. He didn't realize it immediately, and when he did, it was too late. Justin wasn't answering his calls. He was offended, the scoundrel. So Mr. Harris decided to come home earlier and at least briefly forget about his troubles in his wife's embrace. But upon arriving home, he was met with a grand scandal. Jessica had decided that this time, she would wait for her husband, no matter what. Well, she waited. He instinctively pulled his head into his shoulders, remembering how yesterday plates, cups, and even, it seemed, a few pictures, which Jessica carefully extracted from the cupboards, whistled through the air over his much-suffered head, forming a culinary battlefield. On the table, Jessica complained about everything, that she spent whole days alone at home, that she had absolutely nothing to do, that it was utterly obvious her husband had fallen out of love with her and entertained himself every evening with a dozen perky mistresses. And he lied to her, saying he had troubles at work. Each of her complaints was punctuated by another throw, and soon the entire kitchen was littered with broken crockery. Finally, the wife slumped onto a chair, exhausted. Her long black hair was disheveled, mascara smeared under her eyes. She looked like a tired clown. Why did I agree to this? Jessica sobbed. I got married, and what did I condemn myself to? I sit here like a bird in a gilded cage. But I could have lived differently. We all could have lived differently, Mr. Harris muttered. But we live as we do. He left the kitchen, callously crushing the shards of expensive porcelain and crystal under his heels. Part 6 *. That night, Mr. Harris couldn't sleep. Usually, he would collapse into bed and immediately shut off, but this time, sleep eluded him. He heard Jessica take a long shower, talk to someone on the phone, and then come into the bedroom. She slipped under the covers as flexible as a snake. For some reason, this involuntary association with a snake made him uncomfortable, almost scared. He imagined her waiting for him to fall asleep, then wrapping him in her hair and suffocating him. He got up and, without explaining anything, went downstairs to the living room. There was a decent couch there, and right now, it was much more appealing to him than the marital bed. Mr. Harris lay down, tucking a throw pillow under his head. It was quite comfortable, except for the persistent and unfamiliar sweet scent seeping into his nostrils like a thin stream. He sniffed, trying to determine its source, then realized it was the pillow. Moonlight, he thought for some reason. And suddenly, he remembered it was the same cologne Jessica had given him last year. Well, she was crazy about that horrible scent, but he couldn't stand it. The smell of jasmine and lies gave him instant heartburn, nausea, and headaches, sweet, sharp, suffocating. He had thrown the bottle away immediately, and Jessica had been upset for a long time. He had to explain that he had a terrible allergy and wasn't to blame. And now, his house smelled of this unbearable perfume. There hadn't been any guests lately. Jessica, with her inability to keep her mouth shut, would surely have told him. So, did she actually get herself a lover? Having tossed and turned until morning without falling asleep, Mr. Harris went to work. The restaurant was still deserted at this hour, and the sight of the empty bar counter was depressing. The waiters were lazily chatting among themselves, and only the kitchen was bustling with activity. He approached yesterday's waitress, who had witnessed Justin's dismissal. Could one of you take over the bar today? We haven't found a new bartender yet. So yes, they hadn't found a new bartender, nor a new manager. And if he wasn't mistaken, he'd have to find a new wife too. Jerry. He looked around. Jessica, as always, entered the restaurant fully made up and in an unbearably expensive outfit, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind her trailed some unremarkable guy in faded jeans, the bill of his baseball cap almost covering his face. What do you want? Mr. Harris asked unkindly. With a radiant smile, Jessica approached her husband and kissed him on the lips. He grimaced a sticky, sweet kiss from her lipstick, a sickening greeting. "Yesterday, Jerry, I was a bit wrong. Forgive me, darling. And guess what? I completely forgot I've prepared a gift for you. I found a great chef." "Phoo, I don't need a chef," Jerry cut her off. The guy in jeans stepped closer. Jerry held his breath, staring into the stranger's dark, deceptively calm eyes. Nothing like the usual relaxed friendliness, it was the gaze of a predator eyeing its prey. "I can do everything," the man said, his voice low and guttural, thick like caramel sauce. "I can prep, I can cook." His hair, tucked under the baseball cap, was black with a reddish tint, and this guy smelled of jasmine and lily-cursed moonlight. "Can you handle the bar?" Jerry asked hoarsely. The guy just shrugged. "Easily." "Then change and get behind the counter," Mr. Harris ordered brusquely. "If you don't mess up today, the job is yours." After all, if this scumbag was sleeping with another man's wife, it would be fair for him to work for her husband. Of course, he wouldn't get paid. The internship could be prolonged, and then he'd let him go. Let him complain wherever he wanted. But he wouldn't go anywhere because Mr. Harris would readily explain what happens to fools who dare to threaten the family happiness of serious men. And Jessica? He'd figure out how to make her pay for her infidelity. He felt a little better inside. He even allowed himself a brief and almost imperceptible smile. His wife, however, noticed it and happily followed him into the office. "So, did you like my gift?" she asked playfully, snuggling up to her husband. He gently pushed her away. "I have a meeting in half an hour, Jessica," he said. "Remember? I told you." Of course, she smiled. "New spice suppliers. So, is it today?" Mr. Harris looked directly into his wife's beautiful face. "Jessica," he said slowly, "I never told you it was about spices." "How did you know?" A shadow crossed her face. "You didn't tell me," she laughed, adjusted her hair for some reason, and walked over to the table. "Well, for some reason, I thought, well, never mind. I'll confess everything. Chris told me," the manager, former manager, Jessica emphasized. "You see, he called me yesterday, and, well, he already regrets his decision and is ready to come back, if you don't mind. I even told him he could come here this morning. That's when he told me who you have a meeting with. He'll be here by 11. You don't mind, do you?" He smirked. "I see you're already getting involved in my business. Setting up meetings, bringing in new employees." "Well, sorry," she smiled again. "I just want to help you with your affairs, so." "Well, your wish," she abruptly changed her tone, seeing that her husband wasn't responding to her flirtatious teasing. "Since you don't care that we're drifting apart and becoming strangers, since you don't appreciate that I'm trying to somehow save our marriage." "Calm down," he caught her hand. It wasn't time for serious conversations yet. Later, he'd deal with their marriage and everything else. But for now, he needed to allay his wife's anxious vigilance. "Calm down," he repeated. "I really appreciate your concern. I'm just, probably not in the best shape right now. Sorry." Part 7 ***. "Okay," Jessica said, running her finger along the lapel of his jacket. "Well, then you'll have to do something for me." "What?" he smiled faintly. "New shoes? Earrings? What?" "No," Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to meet your future partners, but not right away. First, we'll play them. Listen to what I came up with. You'll invite the dishwasher who annoys you so much into the office and introduce her as your wife. Say she's just a simple girl who works here washing dishes. And when they believe that, I'll show up. It'll be hilarious." Jerry coughed. "That's not quite appropriate. After all, it's business negotiations, not a party." Jessica shrugged. "But it seems you wanted me to forgive you. So I'll forgive you if you arrange this little show for me. After all, I have so few amusements in life," she sighed dramatically. That's right, Jerry said gloomily, just traveling every few months, chatting with the fitness trainer, hairdresser, cosmetologist, masseur, and shopping. Did I forget anything? Oh, yes, meetings with the same bored rich ladies as yourself. Stop it, Jessica interrupted him. Do you want to offend me again? And here I thought, for once, you decided to do something nice for me. But now I see that you're just quiet. He forced another smile. Fine. If this little show entertains you, I'll arrange it for you. Enjoy it. The suppliers will arrive in 10 minutes, and you can. I'll be peeking through the keyhole, Jessica clapped her hands. And I'll enter at the right moment. But for now, I'll sit at the bar. She beamed with joy, like a child unexpectedly handed a coveted gift. Mr. Harris suddenly thought it was a good chance to get rid of the dishwasher from the restaurant. He could present it as if she barged in on important negotiations and ruined everything with her presence. Victoria was just finishing up another batch of dishes when, right in front of her, the chef emerged as if from the ground. Doing the dishes, he inquired casually. Victoria reacted with her usual composure. Just work, she replied emotionlessly and continued her task. Stupid cow, he cursed mentally. What the hell is she? Can't even get a smile out of her, or at least some intonation. Wooden face, wooden voice. Pinocchio, not a woman. I need your help, Victoria. Could you take a short break? You see, he hesitated, inventing some explanation for his request. I have an important meeting right now. My wife was supposed to be there, but she's feeling unwell. I want you to play her role, just briefly. It's just for the contract signing. Victoria slowly removed her rubber gloves. There was still no expression on her face. Wife, for a contract signing, she asked. Seems like it's not a social gathering. And what do you know about gatherings, you wretch? Mr. Harris instantly flew into a rage. Have you seen them on TV and decided you're now an etiquette expert? I haven't fired you.